Hello, everyone. Here we are again recording another episode for our Neo4j Graph Database podcast. My name is Rick van Bruggen. I work for Neo Technology, and on the other side of this Skype call, all the way in the Netherlands, is Tom Zeppenfeldt. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Rick. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. How about yourself?
Yes, I'm doing fine.
That's great. Tom, most people who are listening to this podcast probably don't know you yet. So would you mind introducing yourself? Who are you? What do you do? And what's your relationship to the wonderful world of graph databases?
Okay. Well, my background, my background is not in IT by education. I'm an agriculture engineer. And the main field where I've worked over the last couple of years was in international development in Africa and Latin America, and that's also where there is a link between with the link with Neo4j.
Oh, no way! Tell me about that.
Yeah. Because as you probably know, and there are lots and lots of types of development projects in agriculture, infrastructure, education, and health, for instance. And one of the typical things that you use in that context is what they call result chains. So diagrams that link activities and organizations and results and impact and effects to each other. Okay. And also a concept that is called actor constellation mapping. So that it's a way of diagramming all the interests of different stakeholders in a project and how people collaborate, how they form networks. And while I say networks, I'm already talking graphs.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's great. And so how long ago did you first encounter Neo then? And you know, how did that happen?
That happened about 4 years ago. And when we ran into a very concrete situation where we had to make these kinds of diagrams accessible over the internet. So okay. Instead of drawing PowerPoints with graph-like structures in it, we were looking for a database platform that would allow us to share these things and make these things interactive over the internet.
So then that sort of created the desire to store them in a networked way as well, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very cool. And so, what are you doing now with Neo, Tom? Because I know you're doing some really fancy stuff, but tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, currently, our main project is a project that is partially privately funded and partially subsidized by the Dutch government, and which is focusing researchers like journalists that do research or investigations on a specific subject, and it includes partially Neo4j for storing relations between documents, but also documents and social content from social networks, and also all kinds of tagging and metadata. And for that, we also have a cooperation with 2 universities in the Netherlands that help us to automatically classify and tag documents or to detect relationships inside documents.
Wow, that sounds really
so
great.
So that's the main project that we are working on now. Yes.
Wow, and as I understand it, there's also a big visualization component to that project, right? There's a lot of stuff that you're doing on, how to bring that information visually to those researchers.
Yes, yeah, and indeed that's in terms of what we develop in terms of software is in fact you can consider it an enhanced browser for the Neo4j database. Because once we were starting this project, we were running into we wanted to have more than the standard Neo4j browser,
yep.
And that is why we now have a browser environment with multiple panels and panels that you can link to each other. And in one panel you can display the data as a network. In other panels you can display data as a table, and you can link them to each other. And that's what we call this product is called Prologram for now. And that is what a number of developers are working on actually. Yes.
Very cool. Well, I've seen a couple of I've seen it live and when you presented it at the meetup and everything, but I've also seen some of the YouTube videos, and I'll post those with the podcast as well.
Okay, right.
So maybe just looking at it in a little bit more detail, what do you think is sort of like the most powerful aspect of this? In other words, why, why did you end up choosing a graph database for doing this type of a project? Any comments on that?
Yeah, well, my background, I once had an IT company myself, and that was typically relational databases. And finally, we ended up building a metadata layer to mimic graphs on top of it. And that in fact that says it all, because the real world is far more complex than you can model in a table, well in tables.
Yeah.
And specifically the domains that I've worked in, be it agricultural development or now investigative journalism.
Yeah.
If you have a very generic and basic structure like you have in Neo4j, where also not just the nodes but also the relationships are really things in itself, you call them first-class citizens.
Exactly.
And are very descriptive. It allows you, even when your data model is changing or expanding, and that is what happens very frequently, you don't have to do a complete overhaul of what you already have and still have an optimized structure. So you can keep on building and adding stuff, and that's really for us one of the main advantages of Neo4j, and that is on top of course, the way that you can really do optimized and very localized searches in your graph database. And I have the experience with building meta structures on top of a relational database. Then the number of joins is incredible, and finally it makes it workable.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you've listened to any of the other podcast episodes, but some of the Neo4j founders have been on there as well, and that's how they started Neo4j. They started developing a meta layer or a graph layer on top of, it was Postgres at the time, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you're coming to the right conclusion there. So go for it. Yeah, you wanted to add something?
Well, yeah, that's for us. It was quite easy to pick the concepts, to understand the concepts, and that's also, I think, why we now are making nice progress with what we make as a generic browser on top of Neo4j. Is that we came already from a graph, let's say a mindset that knew how to the advantages of graph database. Yeah.
So what does the future hold, Tom? Where do you think this industry is going? Where should Neo4j go? Where is program going?
Well, that's you said it's 10 minutes this podcast. Yeah. Well, let's limit.
I can pick one.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Say I think graph database are there to stay. It's not a hype. It's especially when relations between content become more and more important than perhaps the properties of content. For instance, we are now working on recommendation engines, and while in the beginning people get recommendation on the basis of properties or links inside the content itself, so very explicitly, now we are already doing tests with integrating in the recommendation the social aspects, and then you finally end up concluding that the suggestions that you can make on the basis of how people use the content, and that is typically something that you can easily store in the graph, they are better than the suggestions that you can make on the basis of the explicit tagging of content. Uh-huh. So this and as the world gets more and more connected, whether it's Internet of Things or documents that are shared, it's the graph model is a very nice way to describe it. You get more exact models than a relational databases. So that's I think the position of graph databases in the world is an established one. what we are now doing with the Program platform, well, we have been building it with let's say about 3 to 4 persons over the last 14, 15 months. We now have a version that is that is on one end is good enough, but we are, let's say, the next 2 to 3 months we will probably start sharing it with the world, because we want to know how people interact with it. And also, I'm sure we are. You cannot keep on developing without user feedback.
Mm-hmm.
We have quite some users, then in terms of functionality, there will be additions like integration with Elasticsearch, a complete function and trigger system that allows you to chain queries. Virtualization of nodes that allows you to make aggregations to visualize aggregations of nodes and relationships. So that's where we are more or less going for the next quarter, and the rest we will. That's more or less the roadmap that we have.
Discover it as you go, right? So
yes,
it sounds really exciting. So I think we'll wrap it up at that, Tom. But it was really great talking to you. Thank you so much for coming online, and apologies for the technical hiccups earlier on. That was entirely my fault. Thank you for coming online, and I'm sure we'll see each other again at one of the next meetups.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Okay, bye.